Hello my friends, welcome to my corner. A few months ago I shared with you my top 10 albums that had made an impact on me, and I promised that I would do a similar list with albums from rock nacional or rock argentino, and that is what I'm doing today. So one of the reasons why I'm doing that today is because today in Argentina, January 23rd, is the Día Nacional del Músico, so the National Musicians Day. And in a while I will tell you why it is celebrated today, because that is important too. Just like last time, I'm doing no greatest hits albums, no live albums, just regular albums. And one disclaimer, I think I said this last time too, this list is by no means to be taken as the best albums of Argentine rock, nothing like that. Okay, this is a very personal and as a result very questionable list. I do want to say that. So I'm going to share with you the 10 albums, and I'll tell you about one famous song and then one song that maybe is not so famous but that I really like. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to link those songs in the description of this video, so that if you want to explore these bands, you will have the chance to do so, and you will know at least where to start, and then you can go on from there. So this is my top 10 albums, Argentine rock, that made an impact on me. Let's see what we have. So I'm going to start with Manal from 1970. Okay, and if you ask many people, they will tell you that Argentine rock, there are four cornerstones. Okay, this is the foundation of Argentine rock. Los Gatos, who had a little bit of a pop rock type of sound. Manal, who was the more rock blues type of band. Almendra, which included elements of folk rock, and then Vox Day, okay, which was also a little bit of folk rock, but also a little bit more progressive. So those are the cornerstones really of rock nacional, and Manal is one of them. If you judge from the development of Argentine rock, there is a case to be made for saying that Manal was actually, of those four bands, the most influential, because it is just pure, unadulterated rock and blues. Okay, I think of Cream when I listen to this band, and that is maybe a point of comparison that you can draw right there. Great influence, okay, on bands that came later on that were just like monolithic, okay, like Patricio Rey, Sus Redonditos de Ricota, Ratones Paranoicos, La Renga, Papos Blues, if we go a little bit before that. So all of these bands were tremendously important, and you can still go to Argentina and listen to what I call pure rock. I know that is a very complex label and maybe not a very good one, but that's what I like to call it. So if you listen to this, the typical song was the track number one, that was the famous one, which was Jugo de Tomate. Okay, so that is just, raw rock and roll, gritty. That gritty sound of Manal, you can hear it there. But then I also wanted to share with you another song that is titled Porque Hoy Nací, and I feel that one is a little bit more original. It still has the typical sound of Manal, but it will also give you a little bit more context when it comes to exploring this band. So that is number one. Let's move on to number two now. And for number two, I have a classic. Okay, this is La Biblia by Vox Day from 1971. This is basically the concept album of Argentine rock, one of the pioneers of that genre in our country. And it is based, of course, as the title indicates, on the Bible. Okay, now without a doubt, we can say that Vox Day, this is their most ambitious and their most transcendent album. If you listen to other albums by them, they're very good, okay, but this is, the album that they managed to include in that canon of Argentine rock. The band itself takes elements from Manal and Almendra, two of those cornerstones that I mentioned before, right? So if you mix those a little bit, that's what you get with Vox Day. La Biblia is basically an early example also of progressive rock. So if you listen to Vox Day, it's kind of like folk rock most of the time, but with this album, it's a little bit more progressive. And because of the date that it was released, right, 1971, I cannot help but think that there was probably an influence there of the fact that Jesus Christ Superstar had just been released, the musical. So I'm pretty sure that had something to do with the thematic elements here. It is clearly based on the Bible because you listen to the tracks Genesis, Moses, the wars, prophecies, the wisdom books, right? Christ and birth, Christ, death and resurrection, and finally Apocalypse. So it takes you basically through the Bible. The first song, Genesis, is very famous, so I chose that one as the famous track to share with you. It has great guitar work, okay, and it opens the album just in a fantastic way. The second track, Moses, is also a little bit, I wouldn't say famous, but quite well known, because another band, Sui Generis, actually recorded a cover of that song. Now, if you want to listen to something epic from this album, I recommend track number 3, Las Guerras. It gives you an idea of those books that describe all those struggles and those wars, the historical books in the Bible. So I really recommend that song. It's really long and it's just epic. There are 3 versions of La Biblia. You have this one, which is the original studio version, which is the one that I would go for. Then there was an ensemble version that they put together, which was also very good. And then they did a remake many years later. Of course, you want to say the original is the best, but that remake, oh my God, that is something else, because they invited other musicians, So it's not one of those cases by any means where you can just dismiss the other albums, because they are very good versions of the same, the same record that they put together. I'm going to go next with Sui Generis Confesiones de Invierno from 1973. This is pop rock, okay, pop rock at its best, with elements of folk, and later on in the career of Sui Generis you have also elements of progressive rock. Some of it, if you go to the later albums, is reminiscent of Pink Floyd, actually. So very, very progressive stuff that we have here. A band that was incredibly popular, very catchy songs, okay. It's one band that you have the harmonizing vocals also, which are just very, very well done. So this band is like, most people that you talk to will tell you that they actually love Sui Generis. And I was asking myself as I was putting together this video and listening to the albums, because I listened to them before doing this actually, and I asked myself, why is it that Sui Generis is so successful, right? What makes it that successful? And the answer that I could come up with is that it actually includes elements from those 4 cornerstone bands, okay? Los Gatos, Almendra, Vox Dei, and Manal. Everything is here, so it's a great synthesis. I think there's something to be said for bands that manage to synthesize things, and this would be an example. It is also the beginning of Charly Garcia's career. Charly Garcia, in a previous video, I called him the mad genius of Argentine rock, and I hold with that. I think that's one way to describe him. One famous song from here, one of the anthems of Argentine rock, is Rasguña las Piedras. Okay, that is the song by Sui Generis that everybody has heard. So that definitely makes the list. But there's one song that is epic, okay, like it's 6 minutes long in this version, but they have a live version that is over 27 minutes long. Un hada, un cisne. So a fairy, a swan. It's a great song that actually tells you a story. It's a suite, like one of those classical compositions. It's a composition more than a song. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to recommend that one. And Confesiones de Invierno, I would say I recommend Un hada, un cisne, but actually listen to the whole album, okay? If there's one song there that you do not like, there are so many classics here. It has Aprendizaje, classic song. Confesiones de Invierno, the one that has the title of the album, is great too. Mr. Jones is another great track. And then the final one, which has this title, listen to it: Tribulaciones, Lamentos y Ocaso de un Tonto Rey Imaginario o No. Great song. Okay, so actually listen to the whole album, and if you don't like it, I don't know, you can tell me, okay? Tell me, Jorge, I did not like this album, we need to have coffee or something, so we'll sit down and we talk about it. But this is an album that you actually need to listen. It's not very long, and it's just amazing. And speaking of amazing, I have another album for that same year. This is Artaud by Pescado Rabioso, named of course after Antonin Artaud. Now, I just said Pescado Rabioso. Great band, fantastic band, but this album is actually not by Pescado Rabioso. This is a solo album that was credited to Pescado Rabioso by the guy who was behind Pescado Rabioso and also behind Almendra, one of the greatest musicians in the history of rock nacional, Luis Alberto Spinetta. And actually, one of the reasons, or the reason, the reason why we celebrate today the Día Nacional del Músico is because it commemorates the birth of Luis Alberto Spinetta. So it's a fantastic reason, and I thought that was a great choice. If you ask me, Spinetta was the greatest musician in the history of Argentine rock, but that is only my opinion, of course. He was a poet and a thinker. Okay, if you read his lyrics, he was just the creator of very personal, mesmerizing melodies, and he's also a master of dissonance. There are sounds here, especially in this album, but in others too, where you go like, who could combine these sounds? You know, only he could do this. He's just a master when it comes to combining sounds that you would never expect to be combined. Arto is actually, if you ask me, the zenith of his work. It was not his favorite album. There are other albums that he considered better than this one, but to me, this is the most, okay, if you ask me. There's a classic song here titled Cementerio Club. The first one is very well known too, Todas las hojas son del viento, that's a classic. But Cementerio Club is considered to be a little bit more elaborate. But there's another great song that is actually over 9 minutes long, titled Cantata de Puentes Amarillos. So that's the one that I'm going to link so you can explore the sound of Arto by Luis Alberto Spinetta, credited, of course, to his band Pescado Rabioso. Next, we're going to go to the 80s, okay? 1986, the band Sumo released this album right here, Llegando los Monos, okay? Sumo was led by an iconic man named Luca Prodan. He was born in Italy. He actually lived in Scotland too. He had a very interesting life. And one of the reasons why he came to Argentina was that he wanted to escape. Okay, I'm not going to go into his biography, but there's always this need to escape in his life. He came to Argentina, and his idea when he got there was to start a band with the influence of Joy Division. And this was at a time where nobody there had listened to Joy Division. They had no idea what he was talking about at that point. The result was completely different. It was just a powerhouse that combines reggae, ska, punk, post-punk, hardcore, and so much more than that. And that is Sumo, one of the most original bands that we have had. The songs are in English and in Spanish. Okay, so during the time of the Falklands War, it was very difficult for them because the radio stations would not play their songs because they were many times in English, right? So this is something that they had to deal with right there. This is a great album, Llegando los Monos, but I had a very difficult time choosing what am I gonna, include here. Divididos por la Felicidad, their first album, which is also very famous and great, or am I going to include this one? And I decided to go with this one. It was a very difficult choice because both albums are really good. Divididos por la Felicidad is great, but this one I feel is a little bit more elaborate, and that is the main reason why I included here. There's a famous song. Everybody has heard the song Los Viejos Vinagres. That song is in Spanish, it's radio friendly and all that. But the one that I wanted to recommend to you is Estallando desde el Océano. It's in English, so the title would be Bursting Out of the Ocean. It's a great song that represents Sumo, if you want to know what the band was all about. We're going to move on now to one of the most important albums in the history of Argentine rock, Canción Animal by Soda Stereo from the year 1990. Okay, Soda Stereo is the Argentine rock band. Okay, this is one band that everybody likes. It's a band that just transcended Argentina. It was very popular in the rest of Latin America too, so it has a great history. Okay, excellent albums, like very consistent, one hit after another. Commercial too, of course, They began with a type of pop style that could be compared to Erasure, to Duran Duran, those kinds of bands, They actually played when those bands went to Argentina. Soda Stereo would be the supporting musicians of those. But they also soon incorporated more elements of a more original rock type of sound, electric guitars and that kind of thing. So they transcended that type of style that they began with. So as I said, they were immensely popular all over the place. Gustavo Cerati, actually the leader of the band, became an icon. And he is today, considered to be an icon. And he also coined the famous thanking phrase, gracias totales. Okay, so that is one of the many things that he did. Of course, the most famous song here is De Música Ligera. That is the anthem of Argentine rock. If there is one song of Argentine rock that everybody has heard, it's probably that one. But I'm gonna mention another one. I like Hombre al Agua, which comes right after that one. Okay, this is just vintage Soda Stereo. But any of those two songs, and actually this is one album that also you can hear the entire thing, and you'll probably like it because it's very, very accessible. A song like De Música Ligera, I mean, just listen to that, okay? And then look me in the eye and tell me you don't like it. I won't believe you, okay? Because it's just that good. It's one of those songs that everybody likes. So if you do listen to it, please let me know what you think, and I hope that you enjoy it. We're gonna stay in 1990, okay? Because this is Rata Blanca, Magos, Espadas y Rosas, okay? A classic also. Rata Blanca is the Argentine heavy metal / hard rock band. Okay, it's that type of music. If you think Rainbow, you know, Richie Blackmore's Rainbow, but also Judas Priest, maybe a little bit of Whitesnake, definitely a little bit of Scorpions, but not frivolous. You know, not like hair metal bands. This is serious stuff. This is good stuff, you know, that you can listen to. The guitar by Walter Giardino is just beautiful. If you like melodic solos, guitar solos, then Rata Blanca is definitely for you. That is the type of music that they make. There were many other heavy metal bands at that time, bands that were like a little bit, you know, more typical of heavy metal, like tougher bands, más polenta, as we say in Argentina, you know. But in this genre, Rata Blanca was all over the place. The other bands were a little bit less accessible to the general public. This was radio friendly, so it had that advantage. The famous song here, which is Mujer Amante, is a song that everybody has heard. If you were in Argentina in 1990, you know, there is no way that you had not heard the song, because it was literally all over the place. But another great song, and I'm gonna recommend to you an instrumental song so that you can listen to the guitar here, is ¿Por qué es tan difícil amar? That is a great instrumental song that features Walter Giardino at his best. So that's why I wanted to include that one. And to also, you know, recognize the fact that instrumental songs are also fantastic, you know. Next, I have from 1991, La Mosca y la Sopa by one of the most venerated bands in the history of Argentine rock. That is Patricio Rey y sus Redonditos de Ricota. Okay, without a doubt, one of the most original bands that we have had. Okay, on the surface, if you listen to it, it seems like it's only rock and roll, but there's really more than that to it. If you explore the band and the sounds that they produce, the lyrics are very interesting because they are in a very personal slang. Sometimes it's very difficult to tell what they're saying. You know, even for me, maybe because I'm not, you know, conversant in this type of slang, but they're very interesting lyrics, very poetic too, right? It's almost like reading avant-garde poetry. And the music, all of the musicians in this band are great, but Sky Bailinson, the guitar player, is just amazing, unlike anything else in Argentine rock. So that is also part of the reason why they are so original. And all of their albums are great. I really love all of them, but La Mosca y la Sopa is the one that to me represents their style the best, that illustrates really the scope of their music. There was a song that was very popular in those days when this was released, Mi Perro Dinamita. It was a classic rock, you know, good old-fashioned rock and roll that was played everywhere pretty much. But there's another song that I wanted to recommend to you, and that is Sanando las Heridas. One of the reasons why I want to recommend this one to you is because it gives you a taste of that dark side to Patricio Rey y sus Redonditos de Ricota, or Los Redondos as we know them affectionately. So they are actually, it gets pretty dark, okay, especially towards the end of their career. And I thought that song would illustrate or give you an example of that other facet of this band. Okay, so after that, are you ready for a little bit of fun? This will provide that fun. This will satisfy. This is Los Pericos' Big Shusho, okay, from the year 1992. This is Pampas reggae, okay? Pampas reggae in the sense that you have reggae, but it has a little bit of a local flavor to it. That is what they did. And the result of that, of adapting reggae to this area of the world, is just a very beautiful and very catchy, type of music that will put you in a great mood. When I was a kid, and if you went to a party or something like that, Los Pericos would be one of the bands that they would play. So were Los Fabulosos Cadillacs, Los Auténticos Decadentes. You know what happened in the 80s and 90s too, but especially in the 80s when this band got started. The local bands, at least in Argentina, were beginning to experiment with sounds from other latitudes. So that's why they would include reggae, they would include ska, and all of those types of music to introduce a little bit of a variation right there. They have songs in Spanish, songs in English, sometimes songs in Portuguese, okay? And this album actually features a cover of Harlem Shuffle. You know that song that was also covered by the Rolling Stones? It's a classic, right? So you have a version of that here that is probably inspired not by the original musicians, but by the Rolling Stones. So Los Pericos had a very interesting history right there, because their first album was very popular. But then the second and the third were a little bit weaker. It was very difficult for them to match, the success of that first album. But then with this one, it was an explosion again, in 1992. They got started in the late 80s. So this was good for them. I believe this is their best album. Okay, so this one, Mystic Love, maybe it's between those two, but great stuff. Anyway, there's a song titled Waiting, okay? Waiting. Once again, all over the place. They played it everywhere, okay? Typical Pericos reggae. I mean, listen to this song and then do your best to get it out of your head. You won't be able to do that, okay? Believe me. So it's one of those songs. And then I wanted to recommend a song that very few people have actually heard from this album, and that is titled Desorden, okay? This is something completely different, but it will give you an idea of how Los Pericos were varied, right? They had many different sounds to them. So the different facets that they have. That song will illustrate that. And then I have one last album for you here, and that is Un Día Perfecto by Ataque 77 from the year 1997. Okay, Ataque 77 was one of the most popular punk rock bands in Argentina. They were not exactly the first band that tried this genre, but they were some of the pioneers, right? The punk rock movement in Argentina got started, generally speaking, a little bit later. 77 was the year for the punk rock movement. The first Ataque 77 album was from 1988. So we're talking, quite, much later. And there are reasons for that, right? Political reasons. In 77, Argentina was going through one of its most bloody dictatorships ever. So that had a lot to do with that delay in the punk rock movement there. So if you listen to Ataque 77, they are reminiscent of the Ramones, right? Definitely, but also the Clash, a little bit of the Clash, especially later on when you have that willingness to experiment with other rhythms and with other types of sounds. In their second album, they continued with punk, right? But they were also including stuff that was a little bit more commercial and radio friendly. For instance, a typical song from that second album is Hacelo por mí, that was played just like the other songs that I told you about, all over the place, and it was even adopted by a TV program of the same name. You know what I mean? So it was really, really commercial. Now, if you listen to Un Día Perfecto, this is like a more alternative type of effort. It's much more ambitious, right? Definitely commercial, but still very well put together when it comes to how the sound of the album is experienced. This had a hit that was the second track, Crecer, okay, which has to do with not wanting to grow up, just like the Ramones would do. Almost at the same time, right, in 1995 or something like that. They had that song, I Don't Want to Grow Up, which is not by them, it's by Tom Waits, but that's another story. So that is the famous song here, Crecer. But I wanted to recommend to you the sixth track, which is Onírico, okay? This is a poetic song, as the title indicates, dealing with dreams. So, great song, that also gives you an idea of what Ataque 77 is like. So, that is my top 10 albums of rock nacional, Argentine rock, that had an impact on me. please don't forget to look at the description, because there you will find the links. Okay, actually that is probably the best part of this video, to let the music speak for itself. And please let me know, if you do listen to the music, what you think about it, and what your thoughts are on Argentine rock. So I hope you enjoyed the list and that you enjoy the music. If you have any questions, comments, recommendations, lists, anything, if you want to share a list of rock from your own country, that would be fantastic, because that would allow us all to experience new music. So that would really be amazing. So that was it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for stopping by. Have a wonderful day, and gracias totales.